Alright, fam. I don't know if I've talked about like role expectations or something along that lines before, but we're gonna talk about it right now just a little bit. So, as I move forward from marriage and come to have processed that um, that I do need that I do feel I need companionship living out the rest of my life. Um, I'm trying to better evaluate the things that I'm looking for my wife to be and not be, because I did not approach my first marriage with that mindset. I definitely should have. Um, which, if I did, I know I would not be married right now. Well, I shouldn't say that. That's not. There's no guarantee on that. I would have chose differently. I can certainly say I would have chosen differently. Um, but I feel this is a conversation that needs to happen when you are dating someone. You need to figure what is the role, well, not what the role is. How do they define what their significant other does for them? Their spouse, their partner, whatever we want to call it. Um, and those are titles, because I'm not in no way am I condoning um, same-sex related. Can't say that word. I'm not condoning any other combination of relationships. I guess you could say romantic relationships or unions other than that of a man and a woman. I'm not condoning any other types, not on this channel. I don't care if you agree with me on that or you don't, but I want it to be very clear to you. Regardless of what title I put on the relationship, I'm talking about a relationship between a man and a woman. Born a man, still a man. Born a woman, still a woman. No changes. Okay? From birth to present to death. Yeah, like, what do you expect that person to be for you? Um, I look at, and the reason I say this is because I look at how, I guess, what was presented to me as the role, as how, the role for a husband, right? Um, so, I will say my how to be a husband. The primary influence that I had on that was my father. My father is still alive, and so is my mother, and they are still married. Um, Now that was so that's the primary. Those they are the primary relationship example of that I had in my life to look at uh, how a woman fulfills her role as a wife, and how a man fulfills his role as a husband. Now, they weren't the only ones, obviously, that were around, but when I look at other, um, I didn't have, I guess you could say, as personal a perspective to look at when it came to anybody else's relationships. So because both of my parents, they were second oldest of 8 children. Now, on my dad's side of the family, because his siblings were close location wise, because they all lived, and the ones that are still alive today live in California. So they were in state. Um, However, as far as looking to them in their roles, they just were not in my life enough for me to really see what was going on in their relationships. I have one, to my knowledge, only one of my uncles was married. Neither of my aunts were. Um, and my uncle, his first marriage did not, it didn't last. And then his second wife, she's recently gone on. But I didn't really get to see, how they were together. But what I did see, and I had this same observation with my own father, is that provider role. And that has always kind of been an influence, and so not an influence, but an emphasis, possibly overly emphasized. I could say it may have been overly emphasized. Um, it's like that's very much even today. It's the first mentioned thing when it comes to the expectations that I'm hearing today of a man. Like, the first thing out of a woman's mouth is he's got to be a provider. Well, that's, at this point, I think you would think at this point it's obvious. Like, if we're not, it should be very clear, it should be very obvious that this is something that we're teaching our children from generation to generation, and across cultures. It's not just not just amongst Israelites. This is amongst other ethnic groups as well. So, there's that. And then, the next things that come across are like, be a good father. What do you say? A provider, a good father. And now, last few years, emotional intelligence. There's a lot of a number of different things that roll out, but I'm just trying to give you a couple of very commonly said now. But the point I'm getting at is these roles, or these different aspects of the husband role or even the father role. For me, I will say a lot of it was not discussed in as much detail as it should have been growing up. And I think that's one thing I can say, that because it didn't happen as much as I believe it should have with me, is where I was not able to have the same level of discussion that I should have had with my son, because I didn't know as I raised him, I didn't have the knowledge or the understanding to have these conversations with him earlier. So some of these conversations we have now, but I look at it and I'm like, if only I could have had some of these conversations earlier. So that's why I will say now it's like I'm mentoring with him because he's an adult, and some things, even though some things he will have to learn through experience, because there are things that you can talk to people about or warn them about till you're blue in the face, but they still might not really understand until they experience it themselves. But yeah, so that's that's why I say there are things that we gotta talk to our children about. There are things that we gotta talk about with the person that we're considering to be a life partner with as well. The holiday thing, that was something that I didn't talk about with her until, and I don't think we were married. Were we married at that point? We may have been married when that conversation actually came up. I do believe we were, to be honest. We were when that conversation came up. But that's a conversation that should have been discussed before getting married. I think other things, what my expectations for her was as my wife, things that I would not necessarily, well, things that I probably would expect based on the household that I grew up in and things that I would desire, regardless of whether they're based off of the household I grew up in or just how I wanted my marriage, what I wanted my marriage to look like, or not necessarily not look like, what I wanted it to be, how I wanted it to function. Responsibilities, the designation of responsibilities, what I wanted her to be responsible for. Because, and I say responsible for because if I'm entrusting you with things, then yeah, you're responsible for. And one of the things that we don't really necessarily, I will say, consider is that in a marriage, you're going to be responsible for emotional support of your spouse. And that's why it doesn't matter if we're talking about from the husband, being whether you're about, it doesn't matter who we're talking about. If we're talking about the husband or the wife, you have some responsibility to the emotional support of the person that you are married to, providing that emotional support, and in that actually is maintaining an environment of peace. That is something that I will say, in the past, we haven't talked much about that in our community, um, openly. Privately, probably. Now that everything is going to the internet, the conversation is more has been brought more to the spotlight. It's been center stage more often. But that is something that we should be talking about too. Providing a place of peace. Um, and now, because now the conversations that are being I will not say the conversation, but the perspective being presented is that you have to find your peace on your own. But the reality is that was not how solitude is not the natural design of the human existence. Because if it was solitude, being by yourself, we would all be in our own little world by ourselves. It'd be you and the animals. You would be like the scenario of the last person on Earth. You know, they did that in the Twilight Zone. There's been movies, scenarios of you being the last person on Earth or whatever like that on a deserted island. Ain't nobody but you, or maybe one other person. But that's not how the existence of of humans has been. The only human that was ever here for a period by himself was the first man that Jehovah created. He was here by himself. And that changed. For obvious reasons. But peace. In an environment of peace, that is one thing that, whether you are the husband or the wife, you owe that to your spouse, to maintain and create an environment of peace. Because where there is no peace, I'm not even going to go there. But if there is a lack of peace, you cannot accomplish as much as you would be meant to accomplish. In more ways than just financial, I will say. Which brings me to another area of responsibility. The men are looked at, husbands, I will say, are looked at as the provider. In this modern world that we live in, especially those that live in these countries that have experienced these crazy levels of inflation and corruption that just seems to permeate the economy. I would say that we are, as a society, post the days of the stay-at-home mother or stay-at-home wife, or the traditional wife, as it was trending last year, at least on the internet, trad wife, or a couple years ago. I don't know, however long that was, doesn't matter. But the traditional wife, yes, in other parts of the world, but not everywhere. Traditional wife lifestyle definitely still exists, and it's still normal in the society, but when you are in these what we'll call Western societies, as they like to call them, it's that is like a it's like a um, it's like a role reserved for the elite, the the wives of the elite of the society, sort of. And I say reserved because at least what's shown to us a lot of times is that the women that can be traditional wives, they have the financial liberty to be traditional wives. A lot of them are not traditional wives. They're doing the most. They are doing the most. And that's trickled down. It's definitely trickled down to the lower economic classes of the society. So we have, this, I like to call it lust for um, the finer things of life. And to access those things, there's a lot of promotion to sacrifice those traditional aspects of the role, of husbands and of husband and wife. I say more so wife than the husband, but it's there. It's there for the men too. But it stands true that that's horrible wording. I think we can all agree that based off what is right there in the book of Genesis in the Bible, and is really the oldest, I would say, record of reasoning as to why the majority of societies hold this view at its core. And the reason we still, what's the word? Not promote. What is that word? We continue to push this view to the net, to the generations coming up, even today, that that a man leads the house, and the woman is the helpmate to the man. And that was the reason for her creation in the first place, to assist the man. This is core in most, like I said, in most societies today. Still, we've been like this. That's been within the core of society since time immemorial, they say. So, even though you have plenty of people that want to fight against this and be like, no, that's it is what it is. Okay, you don't have to agree, but if you can find proof that this has not been there since longer than anyone can possibly tell you. Yeah, send me a message. Let me know, and let me know where you've grabbed this evidence from, too. That the world changed from, like a woman-led existence to a man-led existence. But we still push this, and even though there is still pushback, that pushback is not to the level where it's gonna change uh, society on a global um, level. So it's at the core, and with those things at the core, um, we've got to discuss what those roles look like. You got to discuss what it looks like for you. I'll say for me. So as a man who, like I said, I look back at how it presented itself from my father, and then how it was presented to me from the men who were a part of my life growing up that were husbands, if they were husbands. And I will say, which for me, a lot of those were men from the church that I went to. And within those, there were a few husbands that did not stay with their wives for whatever reason. Some of them did remarry. Some are still single as far as I know today. So, and then even, within those that separated, divorced, whatever, from their wives, um, you know, I've never asked about that. I might actually ask my uncle that one. I've asked my father why he got remarried. But I haven't really asked around a lot, other people that I know that have gotten remarried. Um, One of them was a preacher too. He's got remarried. Matter of fact, his wife got remarried too. So, these are just another thing that I have some questions that I'd like to ask some people about. Why did they get divorced in the first place? And then secondly, why did they get remarried? Um, yeah, these are some conversations that I'm gonna have if I have time to have these conversations. Um, but I've talked to my father about both of those. So now I'm looking, like I said, for me, um, I'm figuring out, not really, yeah, I am. I'm looking at what do I want my wife to be responsible for in our marriage, aside from the emotional support. What is the role that I want her to, what are the roles that I want her responsible for in my home? Things to look at. In remarrying too. Um, what is going to be her expectations? What does she want me to be responsible for? Because those are things that I need to know. Is it just making sure we have the money to take care of the things that need to be taken care of? Or is there more to it than that? What type of lifestyle are we living? because that might affect, you know, I will say that directly affects having the money necessary, since we still move in a system that requires money instead of the traditional bartering, as was eons ago. But yeah, that is something that that's something that I'm considering in that. And these are questions that I have to have. I actually have to have that conversation um, with who I am currently engaging with. So, although it's been lightly in there, but more in depth. Like, you really got to get in depth. Um, what do you have an expectation as a husband for her to be a traditional wife, and what are you defining as a traditional wife as well? Is it just a woman who does not work, um, or does not go out and work for an employer? Is it a woman who does work? I would not call that traditional as far as go out to work, to a job. Um, if you want her to now, and I will definitely, yes, I definitely see this. If you want your wife to be what we'll call traditional stay-at-home mom or wife, she will still need something to occupy her time. Um, Even the people that who I hear call themselves homebodies, they still do something at their own home. They don't, even retired people occupy themselves. You know what I'm saying? Traditionally, no one is just sitting around staring at a ceiling. Maybe those who you will see people who do not do a lot of activity. They'll sit on their porch all day, but that's the thing that they do. They're not sitting in their cave, just sitting there. So, I guess that is, so that's why I say that's something to look at. What are they going to be responsible for? What do you want your woman to be responsible for outside of support, outside of creating an environment of peace, outside of meal preparation, what aspects of childcare, um, like, do you, because there are some things that I will say, even with raising children, that are still going to fall on the responsibility of a man. And that's probably going to be mostly conversations, but, as a man, that you are definitely going to be the primary. I can't even think of what the word I'm trying to put right there. You should be the first one to step up to the plate on it, basically. Not your wife. But regardless of that, these are things that you got to talk about. What is going to be her role with the children? As a man, obviously you can't best breastfeed no kids, so that's not going to be your role. But even that right there, because that, I will say, that definitely bothered me. And I'm not gonna put that all on. There wasn't anything that I could say that I could do necessarily or have done at that time, um, that I'm aware of to help her along with the breastfeeding of our child. Because I mean, that was something that, like, in my opinion, I think she gave up on it, and I don't 100% understand. Well, no, I don't. I don't even know totally as to why that. That's kind of what it. Reflecting back, it seems like she gave up on really trying to do it. Um, but yeah. So, but it is what it is, you know. It is what it is. Excuse me, fam. No, I'm not tired. But what time is it? I could be approaching that time. I'm trying to adjust my sleep schedule. Um, anyway, conversations that have to be talked about or have to be, you have to have these conversations. What's something else I was thinking about when it came to roles? So, like, let me just give you, like, how I guess you can say, kind of like, well, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not. I start telling y'all, this is what I want my wife to do, and then out of the blue, I might have somebody hit me up, like, with some ulterior motives. So no, I'm not gonna divulge that information. That the only woman that needs to know that is a woman that I'm considering. I'm considering to be my wife. No other women need to know about that. But I do feel that the husband's role, the only real, there's been an overemphasis on being the provider. And I say that because the lack of communication about what other things a husband needs to be. So, and I believe that is why all these conversations are coming up in this time about, what a woman's expectations of a man, because a lot of men haven't been coached on this. I would say in my generation, I'm gonna say men that were raised in the 80s and the 90s, maybe the 90s a little bit more so. And the reason I say that, because in my observation, the 90s had more single moms probably than the 80s, or at least I will say in the 90s, single mothers were a lot more visible. Mainstreamly, single mothers were a lot more visible in the 90s than in the 80s and the 70s, and It's not like they weren't there, but the visibility of the single mom increased in the 90s and into 2000s, especially with these reality shows. Oh my gosh. Don't get me started on reality shows. Like, reality shows took a societal turn for the worst, for in a backwards direction, a very backward direction. Because at least in the United States, it was, is entertainment, but this reality being presented that people were and are living the today, is just, it's a direct reflection of what was being presented through these reality shows. The Real World, 16 and Pregnant, the Teen Mom, what's the other, like Big Brother, what's the Survivor, those celebrities finding love shows like Jersey Shore, man, or the Real World, was it Real World Road Rules? Like, oh my god. So yeah, it was entertainment, but then people really started living like that. They really were not even started yet. They were living like that. Really living like that. And you just consider how a lot of that, what you have been seeing in reality TV is become a gigantic step away from traditional marriages, traditional relationships, traditional lifestyles. Because I could come on here and, 5 minutes from now and be like, hey, you know what? I'm a seahorse. You're going to have to accept that. I don't care what you think if you don't believe it. I'm a seahorse. I'm a seahorse that breathes air. I don't live in the water, I live on the land. I just can't swim because I'm a black seahorse. No, totally unnecessary. But I'm serious, people. Like, you gotta understand the seriousness here of that. How a reality that has been fed to you, and it's not even the reality. It's not a a genuine reality. It's disingenuous to the human existence, to the design of the human existence, might be more accurate. It's disingenuous to that design. And that's why we gotta have these conversations of, of how is the role of a wife defined to you as a man? Because you need to talk about that with any woman that are that you have an interest in and might possibly be inclined to marry. So she can also choose the right spouse for her, the right husband for her, because she might not want to be, have the desire to be, or it might not be in her capacity to fulfill all those aspects of the role that you want her to be in. Just like it might be the same for you. You might not be able to or desire to fulfill all those aspects of the role that she is looking for you to fulfill as a husband. And it might just be because you're not ready to. It might not be because you're not capable. You might not be ready. And that's similar to a conversation that I had with someone recently. I told her that the woman that I am supposed to marry just might not be ready to marry me at this time. And I might not be ready to marry her at this time. So what I do recognize that I need to do is to let the Most High prepare me to be ready, so that way when He shows me who this woman is, if He hasn't brought her to me already, I'll be ready. Because that's the most that we really can do. Prepare to be ready. If we're not preparing to be ready, how do you expect to find that person in the first place? You're not preparing yourself to find that person. And it's going to come with interacting with other people, because you don't understand the type of person that you're looking for until you got an understanding of what you're not looking for. And you don't have to, that doesn't mean date people just to figure it out. You don't have to date people. All you gotta do is get to know them. Just get to know people. Everybody isn't supposed to be someone you date. You know, we allow the lines to blur between what we'll call platonic and romantic. But the person that you are partnering with for the rest of your life is more than just, it's more than romance. It's emotional support, it's financial support, it's physical support. And I mean all of those in the most literal of senses. Because if they're not able to support or to provide financially, does that mean you both are going to just die from starvation or just lack of, like, are you both, is that the end of your story? Be like, oh, well, he can't, provide for us, so I guess we're just gonna sit here and die. Like, who taught you that? If one of you has your foot cut off, I don't know, I know it's extreme. It's extreme. We'll say this unfortunate thing of somebody steps on a landmine, but it's only their, part of their leg is blown off maybe, or just the foot. It's not a whole, like, they don't lose a whole limb completely type deal. But, even a person with one foot can still get around. There's still work that they can do. But let's say it prevents them from doing the type of work that is going to be enough work to support the both of you. What are you going to do? Give up on life? You're going to lay down and die? Or, you're going to keep going? Are you going to make sure they're good, or are you just worried about yourself? You're just trying to make sure you're good. that's not that's not what it's supposed to be at that point. It's supposed to make sure each other is good, emotionally, physically, financially. Um, yeah. So I don't think there's any more that I'm gonna really be adding into that conversation at this time. I think we'll cut it off right there because I've been talking to you all for like a good hour almost. So if you like the video or whatever, and give it a like, share it, comment on it, whatever you want to do. And I'll talk to y'all later.